Jake walked on stage in a hoodie and cap, just a mystery founder with a demo no one expected to work. In minutes, he stunned the crowd. His tech slashed energy costs live, while the man who mocked him watched in silence from the front row. Then, Jake pulled off his cap and revealed the last face anyone expected. But what happened next will shock even those who thought they'd seen everything. But first, let's go back to the beginning. Jake Ellison's fingers tightened around the edge of the podium, his knuckles whitening as he stared at the sea of black blazers and blank stares spread before him. The VentureWorks demo floor was a clinical grid of pop-up stages and unforgiving light, the kind that made even confidence look like sweat. Fluorescent panels buzzed overhead, the hum mixing with murmured conversations and the occasional click of investor heels against polished concrete. He had rehearsed this pitch 100 times, before mirrors, in empty meeting rooms, even whispering it to himself while half asleep. But none of that had prepared him for this moment. The moment his voice would need to cut through indifference and prove that EcoCircuit was more than just a desperate man's gamble. Then came the voice. It was syrupy and sharp, a performance dressed as a joke. "Still playing with Legos, Jake?" Jake didn't have to turn. He knew that voice. Troy Maddox always made sure people heard him, especially when it hurt the most. He turned anyway, because you always look your enemy in the eye, even when it's someone who used to share your late-night pizza and crash on your couch. Troy's smile had the smirk of someone who'd already won. He didn't look at Jake. He looked past him. At the barely assembled projector, the taped-up screen, the outdated branding on the EcoCircuit slide deck. A relic compared to Troy's VoltWorks, whose neon blue logo now glared down from a 12-foot banner like a corporate god. "Maybe let the grown-ups handle real innovation," Troy added, louder this time. Laughter fluttered through the nearby cluster of suits, tight and unsure, like the sound of men laughing only because they don't want to seem wrong later. Jake caught Daniel Corner's glance, a slow, evaluating twitch of the brow. A small gesture, but enough to gut a man on a stage. For a second, Jake considered walking away, just dropping it all. He could feel every sleepless night, every sacrificed weekend, every declined dinner invite hanging from his shoulders like wet concrete. But something in Troy's eyes, smug, satisfied, careless, snapped him out of it. Troy had made one mistake. In his arrogance, he assumed Jake had come here defenseless. He hadn't. Not entirely. And that, Jake thought as he forced his breath steady, would be Troy's first and final miscalculation today. The office was empty, save for the low hum of Jake's monitor and the rhythmic tick of a wall clock that hadn't quite kept pace with his exhaustion. The startup hub where he rented a late-night desk smelled like burned coffee and drywall, both still clinging from renovations that were never quite finished. It was 2:13 a.m. when his browser pinged with a push notification. He clicked, instinctively expecting another automated newsletter, but what loaded was a press release. VoltWorks announces breakthrough grid optimization tech, powered by predictive AI. The bold, confident headline yawned across the screen like a slap. At first, Jake's brain rejected it. It had to be coincidence. After all, energy optimization wasn't a niche only he had thought of. But as he skimmed through the press copy and Troy's trademark smugness leapt off the page, unease gave way to clarity. The phrases were too familiar. Neural balancing, nodal forecasting, load shift elasticity, technical terms Jake had coined himself in whiteboard sessions with Mina nearly 14 months earlier. Then he remembered the meetup. 2 weeks ago, one dimly lit bar in Soma. He'd spotted Troy, buttoned up, drink in hand, laughing too comfortably beside Mina. At the time, Jake had chalked it up to awkward coincidence. She'd left EcoCircuit months ago after a blowout over ownership clauses, and their last conversation had ended with a door slam and silence. She wouldn't betray him, would she? But now, as he stared at Troy's press release and its perfectly timed media push, the edges sharpened. Voltworks didn't just beat him to market. They had weaponized fragments of his own work, dressed up his foundation in a sleeker interface, wrapped it in buzzwords, and sold it as innovation. Jake's hands trembled, not from fear, but from fury. But rage, he knew, was no strategy. He closed the browser, cracked his neck, and opened a clean instance of his code base. The real one, the one with functioning architecture and embedded feedback loops Troy couldn't replicate if he had a year and a PhD. That night, Jake renamed the core module, stripped it to essentials, and reskinned it under a pseudonym. He registered as Everin Keene, a fake founder with a real product. And with meticulous care, he submitted it to the Green Spark grant program, knowing precisely who sat on its funding board. Let Troy drink in the headlines. Let him pose for glossy photos with half-finished tech. Jake was done chasing credit. He was building something unstealable. The room had the buzz of money on the verge of movement, restless, curious, watching. High ceilings, glass walls, a polished mahogany stage that reflected every step like a second self. The Green Spark Innovation Showcase wasn't just another startup pitch event. It was the pitch event, where VCs didn't browse, they hunted. And tonight, they were circling. Jake Ellison stepped onto the stage not as himself, but as the silhouette of a myth. The showcase's mystery finalist, selected anonymously from over 200 entries, had stirred curiosity in every corner of the industry for weeks. Everin Keene, the pseudonym Jake had submitted under, had become a whisper in Slack channels and private equity group chats. No one knew his face. No one had seen his demo, but the numbers leaked through: live recalibration, predictive grid smoothing, double-digit savings. The metrics were almost too perfect. And now he was here. He wore a plain black hoodie, no brand, no startup swag. His beard was trimmed tighter than usual, and a cap shadowed his eyes. He stepped up, nodded to the spotlight operator, and tapped the mic once. Just once. Then he spoke. "My name," he said, "is Everin Keene, and what you're about to see isn't a concept. It's live, functional, and already saving energy in 3 test environments across 2 states." The demo began. A projected mock grid, dozens of suburban nodes with irregular peaks and consumption troughs spilled onto the screen behind him. Jake typed a single line of code, hit enter, and the system recalibrated in real time. One by one, the load spikes evened out. Consumption dropped. Efficiency surged. 27% savings. On screen. Live. The room went still, then snapped. Claps, murmurs, necks craning for a closer look. A few investors shot upright, exchanging glances like something seismic had just shifted beneath them. Jake saw it, but he was watching one person only. Troy Maddox, front row, dead center. Troy's grin, smug and easy as always, had faltered in the first 30 seconds. By minute 2, it had vanished entirely. By the end, his hands were motionless on his lap, his mouth a tight line that didn't quite close. Jake took a breath. Then he pulled the cap from his head. Gasps scattered like marbles on glass. Daniel Corner's jaw visibly slackened. "Wait, you built this? But Troy said..." Jake didn't flinch. "Troy didn't build anything," he replied evenly. "He stole early concepts. I built the working solution." No need to raise his voice. The truth was loud enough. The ink on the term sheet hadn't dried before the headlines began. Horizon Capital backs Anonymous. Genius Eco Circuit. Secures $500K to revolutionize grid efficiency. Mystery founder, outsmarts industry. Giant in stunning live demo. Jake read none of them. Not out of humility. He'd fought too hard to pretend he didn't care, but because he had work to do. Real work. Funding meant deadlines. Attention meant scrutiny. Hype was a sugar high, and Jake had built EcoCircuit to solve problems, not chase vanity metrics. Still, the storm came, and not all of it was his. Troy, as predictable as ever, struck first. A slick medium post riddled with jargon and barely veiled barbs. Claims of data compromise, malicious misrepresentation, and an especially ironic line about integrity in innovation. It might have gained traction. Troy had built a loyal following of surface-level thinkers, if not for Mina. Her response wasn't a post. It was a thread. Cold. Factual. Time-stamped. Screenshots of Troy's late-night messages, laced with desperation. Requests for just a glimpse of EcoCircuit's back-end. Promises of credit later. A single closing line ended any ambiguity. This isn't innovation. It's theft. The fallout was instant. Tech Twitter turned overnight. AngelList forums lit up. Within days, Voltworks' key back-end developer announced his exit, effective immediately. Investors ghosted. Their Series B round evaporated. One VC called the situation beyond toxic in an off-the-record quote that still made it into print. Jake, meanwhile, stayed silent, but the world didn't. The startup that beat the bully became more than a headline. It was a mantra. Jake was profiled in Wired, invited to speak at GridCon, and even offered a TED slot. He declined most of it, not out of spite, but clarity. Revenge had never been the goal. Vindication was merely the byproduct of doing the work right and refusing to let the wrong people own it. Weeks later, Jake found himself alone on the rooftop terrace of the Green Spark building, the skyline glittering like a promise just out of reach. The city below pulsed with the energy he had helped refine, every flickering bulb a whisper of what might come next. He didn't toast. He didn't post. He stood still, breathing it in. Justice hadn't screamed. It hadn't broken down doors or demanded applause. It had arrived like code in the night. Clean, precise, silent. And somewhere in a quiet boardroom, Troy Maddox still paced, still puzzled, still blind to the truth. He never lost to Jake. He lost to someone who outworked him long before the spotlight hit.